40 years dedicating my entire life to my children. And last Christmas, I was the only person in the family who didn't get a gift from my youngest son. I pretended not to care, but inside, something in me died in that moment. The silence in that living room was the loudest thing I had ever heard in 40 years of being a mother. I sat there on Christmas morning, watching my family unwrap their carefully chosen gifts, each rustling sound of paper cutting through me like broken glass. My oldest son, David, opened his new fishing gear and grinned at his wife, Sarah. My daughter, Jennifer, squealed over the jewelry her husband picked out. Even my daughter-in-law, Lisa, David's wife, received a beautiful scarf from my youngest son, Michael. Everyone was smiling, hugging, saying thank you. Everyone except me. Because there wasn't a single gift under that tree with my name on it from Michael. Not one. I kept waiting. Kept telling myself maybe he was saving mine for last. Building up the surprise. Maybe it was hidden somewhere special. Maybe this was all some elaborate joke that would make sense in a few minutes. But the pile of discarded wrapping paper grew higher, and the knot in my stomach grew tighter. And still nothing. Nothing for the woman who had spent 40 years making Christmas magical for everyone else. I tried to keep smiling. God knows I tried. When Michael looked over at me with that casual shrug, that little half smile that used to be so endearing, I felt something crack inside my chest. Not break exactly, but crack. Like ice on a pond when the temperature starts to shift. "Mom, you know you don't really need anything," he said, settling back into his chair with his coffee, like this explained everything. Like this was reasonable, like this was normal. The room went quiet for just a beat too long. Jennifer glanced at me, then at Michael, her forehead creasing slightly. David cleared his throat and started talking about the weather, because that's what we do in this family. We smooth things over, we keep the peace, we pretend everything is fine when it's not. But I couldn't pretend anymore. Not this time. "Of course," I heard myself say, my voice sounding strange and far away. "Of course I don't need anything." The thing is, he wasn't entirely wrong. Materially speaking, I had everything I needed. A comfortable house that I'd paid off years ago through careful budgeting and sacrifice. A closet full of clothes that would last me the rest of my life. Enough books to read until I die. But that wasn't the point, was it? It was never about needing something. It was about being thought of, being remembered. Being worth the effort of choosing something, wrapping it, putting my name on it. It was about mattering. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home with their full bellies and satisfied smiles, I sat alone in my kitchen staring at the pile of dishes. The same kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals for my family. The same counter where I'd packed countless school lunches, decorated birthday cakes, prepared holiday feasts. The same sink where I'd stood washing dishes while listening to my children talk about their days, their dreams, their problems. I'd been the listener, always the listener, the fixer, the giver. The one who remembered everyone's favorite foods, who kept track of sizes and preferences and allergies. The one who started Christmas shopping in October and wrapped presents until my fingers cramped, making sure every gift was perfect, personal, meaningful. And what did I get for 40 years of that? Nothing. Not even the courtesy of a card with my name spelled correctly. I picked up my phone to call my sister Ruth, then put it back down. What would I say? That my feelings were hurt because my grown son didn't buy me a Christmas present? It sounded petty even in my head. Ruth would probably tell me I was being too sensitive, that I should be grateful my family was healthy and together, that material things don't matter, that I was lucky to have such a wonderful son who visits regularly and includes me in family gatherings. But she didn't see what I saw. She didn't live with the slow, steady erosion of respect that had been happening over the past few years. The way conversations would stop when I entered a room. The way decisions were made without consulting me, even about things that directly affected me. The way I'd gradually been repositioned from matriarch to burden, from someone whose opinions mattered to someone who was tolerated. It started so subtly I almost missed it. Little changes in how Michael talked to me, how he looked at me, or rather, how he stopped looking at me. When had I become invisible in my own son's eyes? I thought about calling him, asking him directly, but I knew what would happen. He'd get that irritated tone in his voice, the one that made me feel like I was being unreasonable. He'd say I was making a big deal out of nothing. He'd probably bring up all the things he does for me, like fixing my computer when it acts up or taking out my garbage cans on collection day. As if basic kindness was the same thing as love. As if duty was the same thing as caring. The worst part was Lisa. Sweet, quiet Lisa, who always smiled at family gatherings and complimented my cooking, who asked about my garden and seemed genuinely interested in my answers, who I'd welcomed into our family with open arms 12 years ago, grateful that Michael had found someone who made him happy. But Lisa had gotten a present from Michael, a beautiful, expensive scarf that she modeled for everyone, her face glowing with pleasure. Michael had remembered her favorite color, had noticed she'd mentioned needing something warm for her neck. He'd paid attention to her in all the ways he'd forgotten to pay attention to me. I found myself wondering when that changed. When did I stop being worth his attention? When did I become the obligation instead of the priority? Sitting there in my quiet kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of a Christmas that everyone else would remember as perfect, I made a decision. I was going to find out what was really going on. I was going to understand why my relationship with my youngest son had shifted so dramatically, and I was going to do something about it. I didn't know what yet, but something. The next morning, I woke up with purpose for the first time in months. I made my coffee, sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, and started making a list, not a grocery list or a to-do list, but a timeline. When did things change? What were the signs I'd missed or dismissed? It was harder than I expected. The changes had been so gradual, so subtle, that pinpointing when they began felt like trying to catch smoke. But as I sat there, really thinking about it, patterns started to emerge. The phone calls that used to come every few days had dwindled to once a week, then once every 2 weeks. The invitations to family dinners had become less frequent. The casual dropping by that used to happen had stopped completely. Michael now called before coming over, and only for specific reasons. Fix this. Can you watch the kids? Do you have that recipe? When was the last time he'd called just to talk? When was the last time he'd asked how I was doing and waited for a real answer? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this Christmas morning hadn't been an isolated incident. It had been the culmination of a slow, steady distancing that I'd been telling myself was normal. That's what happens when children grow up, get married, start their own lives. They pull away from their parents. It's natural, healthy even. But was it healthy when it felt like abandonment? Was it natural when it happened so completely, so coldly? I thought about David, my older son, and how different his approach was. Yes, he had his own life, his own family, his own priorities, but he still called regularly, still included me in decisions when appropriate, still treated me like someone whose opinions and feelings mattered. The difference was stark when I really examined it. What made Michael different? What had changed in him, or in his circumstances, that made him treat me so differently than his brother did? And that's when I started thinking about Lisa, really thinking about her. Lisa, who was always so sweet to my face, but somehow never quite met my eyes when she spoke. Lisa, who complimented my cooking, but always brought her own dishes to family gatherings, as if mine weren't good enough. Lisa, who asked about my garden, but never remembered what I'd told her from one conversation to the next. Lisa, who had been married to my son for 12 years, and in all that time had never once called. me just to chat. Never once suggested we spend time together without Michael. Never once treated me like someone she actually wanted a relationship with, rather than someone she had to tolerate because I came with the marriage. I'd always assumed she was just shy, reserved, that some people took longer to warm up, and that was okay. I'd given her space, tried not to be the overbearing mother-in-law stereotype. I'd been patient, understanding, accommodating. But what if I'd been wrong? What if her reserve wasn't shyness at all, but something else entirely? I poured myself another cup of coffee and kept writing. This time, I focused specifically on Lisa. Her body language during family gatherings, the way she positioned herself in rooms, always slightly apart from the group, always with a clear path to the door. The way she watched conversations instead of participating in them, like she was taking notes instead of connecting. The way she touched Michael's arm when he started to engage too enthusiastically with family discussions, a gentle reminder that seemed to rein him back in. How had I never noticed that before? I spent the rest of that day reconstructing months of family, interactions through this new lens, and what I saw made my stomach turn. Lisa hadn't been shy or reserved. She'd been strategic, calculating. Every smile, every compliment, every moment of apparent warmth had been carefully calibrated to maintain a facade while keeping real intimacy at bay. And slowly, subtly, almost imperceptibly, she'd been pulling Michael away from us. Away from me. The question was why? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? That night, I called Jennifer, not to complain or gossip, but to test my theory. I asked casual questions about her interactions with Lisa, about whether she'd noticed any changes in Michael's behavior over the years. I was careful not to lead her answers, not to plant ideas, but Jennifer was perceptive. She always had been. "You know, Mom," she said after a few minutes of careful conversation, "I've always felt like Lisa keeps Michael on a pretty short leash. Nothing obvious, nothing you could point to and say, that's controlling, but I don't know. It's like she manages his relationships for him, even with us. Those words hit me like a physical blow because they confirmed what I was starting to suspect. This wasn't about Michael naturally growing away from his family as he matured. This wasn't about normal, healthy boundaries between a married man and his mother. This was about manipulation. This was about someone systematically isolating my son from the people who loved him most. And I was going to prove it. The first real proof came 3 weeks after Christmas, and it hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I was cleaning out my mailbox when I found it, wedged behind some junk mail from the post office. A small package, slightly damaged from being crammed into the back of the box, with my name written, in Michael's familiar handwriting. My heart stopped. There was no return address, but I knew that writing like I knew my own breathing. Inside was a beautiful pair of earrings, silver with tiny blue stones that matched my favorite dress perfectly, the kind of thoughtful gift that showed someone had really paid attention, really cared. There was a card too, with a message that made my hands shake as I read it. "Mom, I saw these and thought of you immediately. Thank you for always being there for us. I love you more than words can say. Merry Christmas, Michael." The postmark was December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. 2 days before I sat in that living room feeling forgotten and discarded. He had bought me a gift. He had remembered me. He had cared enough to choose something perfect, to write a message from his heart, to mail it to me in time for Christmas. So where had it been on Christmas morning? I called the post office immediately, my voice shaking with something between rage and relief. The postal worker was apologetic but vague. Sometimes packages get delayed, especially during the holiday rush. Sometimes they get missorted, end. Up in the wrong place, take a few extra days to find their way to the right destination. But this package hadn't been delayed by the postal service. The postmark proved it had arrived on time, which meant it had been sitting in my mailbox for 3 weeks, hidden behind other mail in a way that seemed almost deliberate. I stood there in my driveway holding that package, and for the first time, since Christmas morning, I started to see the bigger picture. Someone had wanted me to believe that Michael had forgotten me. Someone had wanted me to feel discarded, unimportant, unloved. But who had access to my mailbox? The answer made me sick to my stomach. Lisa had a key to my house. She'd had one for years in case of emergencies. She also helped me bring in my mail when I was out of town visiting Ruth, or when I was sick and couldn't get to the mailbox myself. I trusted her with that key, trusted her to help me when I needed it. I'd never imagined she might use it against me. I spent the next several hours pacing my house, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the package really had been delayed. Maybe it was just a coincidence that it ended up hidden in exactly the right spot to remain unnoticed for weeks. Maybe I was seeing malice where there was only unfortunate timing. But then I started thinking about other things, other small incidents. That had seemed odd at the time, but that I'd dismissed as unimportant. Like the birthday cards from my sister that sometimes arrived weeks late, even though Ruth always mailed them well in advance. Like the phone messages that Michael claimed he never received, even though I'd left them with Lisa. Like the family photos that kept disappearing from my refrigerator, only to reappear days later in slightly different positions. Like the way Lisa always insisted on checking my mailbox for me when she visited, claiming she was just trying to be helpful. I sat down at my kitchen table and started making another list. This time, I wrote down every instance I could remember of mail going missing, messages not being delivered, small personal items mysteriously relocating or disappearing entirely. The pattern that emerged was chilling. It had been going on for months, maybe years. That evening, I called Michael directly, not to confront him, not yet, but to test something. I told him I'd received his package, thanked him for the beautiful earrings, told him how much the card had meant to me. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. "Mom," he finally said, and his voice sounded strange, confused. "What package?" I described the earrings, read him the message from the card word for word. Another long silence. I don't understand. I didn't send you any earrings." The lie was so smooth, so immediate, that for a moment I doubted myself. But I was holding the evidence in my hands. His handwriting, his words, his obvious care and thoughtfulness. "Michael, this is your handwriting. This is definitely your handwriting." "Mom, I'm telling you, I didn't send you anything for Christmas. We talked about this. You don't really need..." "Stop." The word came out sharper than I intended. "Just stop. I have the package right here. I have the card. I know what your handwriting looks like." Another pause. Then, in a voice that sounded smaller, more uncertain, Can you describe it again?" I did, in detail. The silver setting, the blue stones, the specific wording of the card. With each detail, I could hear something shifting in his voice, some wall cracking. "Oh, my God," he whispered. "Oh my God, Mom, I did buy you those earrings. I remember now. I mailed them, but Lisa said..." He stopped talking. "Lisa said what?" "She said you'd called and told her you didn't want any gifts this year, that you were trying to simplify your life and didn't want us spending money on things you didn't need. She said you were embarrassed about having too much stuff and wanted us to donate to charity instead." I felt the room spinning around me. I never said that. I would never say that. She said you were too proud to tell us directly, so you asked her to let us know. She said it would hurt your feelings if we ignored your wishes. The manipulation was so elegant, so perfectly designed, that I almost had to admire its sophistication. Lisa had created a lie that painted me as thoughtful and selfless while simultaneously ensuring I'd be hurt and disappointed. She'd used my supposed pride against me, made it seem like respecting my wishes required ignoring me entirely. And she'd done it in a way that made Michael feel like he was being considerate instead of cruel. "Michael," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I never said any of that to Lisa. I've never said anything like that to anyone." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could practically hear the gears turning in his mind, processing this information, trying to make sense of what it meant. But why would Lisa tell me that if it wasn't true? It was a fair question, an innocent question. The question of someone who couldn't imagine the person he loved being capable of such calculated cruelty. "I don't know," I said, even though I was starting to have some very clear ideas about why. "But Michael, I need you to think. Has this happened before? Have there been other messages from me that came through Lisa that seemed unusual?" Another long pause. Then, sometimes you seem different when I talk to you than I expect based on what Lisa tells me. Like when she said you were upset about us not inviting you to Jessica's birthday party. But when I asked you about it, you seemed confused. My granddaughter's birthday party. I'd never even known there was a birthday party. What birthday party? Jessica's 8th birthday back in September. Lisa said you were hurt that we hadn't invited you, so I called to apologize, but you acted like you didn't know what I was talking about. I figured you were just being polite, trying not to make me feel bad. I closed my eyes. Another perfectly crafted manipulation. Lisa had created a conflict that didn't exist, made Michael think he'd hurt me, then made him believe I was too gracious to hold it against him. Meanwhile, I'd been completely unaware that my granddaughter had had a birthday party I wasn't invited to. "Michael, I didn't know about Jessica's party. Nobody told me about it." "But Lisa said she mentioned it to you weeks in advance. She said you seemed enthusiastic about it." "When? When did she mention it to me?" She said she called you one afternoon when you were gardening. She said you talked for like 20 minutes about what gift to get Jessica and whether we should have the party at the park or at home. I would have remembered that conversation. I loved talking about my grandchildren, loved being included in their celebrations. That wasn't the kind of conversation I'd forget. Michael, that conversation never happened. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, processing this, trying to reconcile the wife he trusted with the evidence that she'd been lying to him. Maybe she got confused. Maybe she meant to call you but forgot, and then misremembered doing it. The desperation in his voice broke my heart. He was trying so hard to find an innocent explanation, some way to make this all make sense without having to confront the possibility that his wife had been systematically manipulating him. "Michael, honey, I need to ask you something, and I need you to really think about the answer. How many times in the past year has Lisa been the one to relay messages between us? How many times has she told you something about me, or told me something about you instead of us talking directly?" The silence was so long, I started to worry he'd hung up. "A lot," he finally admitted. She said she was trying to help, that you were getting older and sometimes had trouble keeping track of conversations, so it was easier if she helped manage communication. She said you'd asked her to help coordinate family stuff because you were feeling overwhelmed. Each word was like a knife in my chest. Lisa had painted me as declining, failing, unable to manage my own relationships. She'd positioned herself as the helpful daughter-in-law stepping in to manage the poor, confused old woman who couldn't handle her own life anymore. And Michael, sweet Michael, who loved me and wanted to help, had accepted this narrative because it came from someone he trusted, someone he shared a bed with, someone he'd promised to honor and trust for the rest of his life. Michael, I have never asked Lisa to manage my communication with you. I have never had trouble keeping track of conversations. I am not overwhelmed by family coordination. But she seemed she was just trying to help. She said it made her feel useful to be able to take care of family things. Take care of. Manage. Control. Has she been doing this with other family members too? What do you mean? Has Lisa been relaying messages between you and David? Between you and Jennifer? Has she been the go-between for other family communications? I waited while he thought about it. I could practically hear the pieces clicking into place. Yeah, he said slowly. Yeah, she has. She said it was just easier since she was home more often and could keep track of schedules better. She made it seem like she was being organized and helpful. And have you had any misunderstandings with David or Jennifer lately? Any situations where you thought they said or did something that seemed out of character? The pause was shorter this time. Actually, yeah. David was weird with me at Thanksgiving. He seemed angry about something, but when I asked him about it, he acted like I should know what it was about. And Jennifer's been distant lately. I thought maybe she was just busy with work. My heart was racing. Lisa hadn't just been manipulating my relationship with Michael. She'd been orchestrating conflicts throughout the entire family, creating misunderstandings and resentments, positioning herself as the only reliable source of information while simultaneously making that information unreliable. It was psychological, warfare, and she was winning because none of us had realized we were under attack. Michael, I said, my voice steadier now that I understood what we were dealing with, I think we need to have a serious conversation. A face-to-face conversation, just you and me, without Lisa. Mom, I can't just exclude Lisa from family discussions. She's my wife. I'm not asking you to exclude her from family discussions. I'm asking you to have one conversation with your mother without your wife's interpretation filtering everything I say. The request seemed to unnerve him. But Lisa doesn't filter what you say. She just helps coordinate things. Then it shouldn't matter if she's there or not, should it? If she's just helping coordinate, then the two of us should be able to coordinate just fine on our own. I could hear him struggling with this logic, trying to find a flaw in it that would let him avoid the uncomfortable conversation I was suggesting. What would we talk about that we can't talk about with Lisa there? We'd talk about whether the things she's been telling you about me are true. We'd compare notes about family communications over the past year. We'd figure out whether there's been a pattern of misunderstandings and mixed messages that might have a single source. Mom, you're making it sound like Lisa is lying to me, like she's deliberately causing problems. I'm not making it sound like anything. I'm asking you to help me figure out what's been happening to our family, because something has been happening, Michael. You felt it yourself, or you wouldn't have bought me those earrings. You wouldn't have written that card telling me how much you love me. Some part of you knew that we'd been drifting apart in ways that didn't make sense. He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was small and confused. I did feel like something was wrong. I just couldn't put my finger on what it was. Then help me put my finger on it. Help me understand what's been happening to us. Okay, he said. Finally. Okay, we can talk. But Mom? If this turns out to be some kind of misunderstanding, if Lisa really has just been trying to help, then we'll apologize to her and figure out better ways to communicate. But Michael, if it turns out to be something else? I let the sentence hang between us, unfinished, but clearly understood. We made plans to meet the next evening at a diner halfway between our houses. Neutral territory where we could talk without interruption, without Lisa's helpful management, without anyone else's interpretation of what our words meant. As I hung up the phone, I realized I was shaking. Not from fear, but from something else, something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. The diner was nearly empty when I arrived, just the way I'd hoped it would be. I chose a corner booth where we could talk without being overheard, ordered coffee I didn't really want, and waited for my son to walk through that door. When Michael finally appeared, he looked older than I remembered. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there at Christmas, a tightness in his shoulders that spoke of sleepless nights and difficult conversations. He slid into the booth across from me without his usual smile, and I knew that the past 24 hours had been hell for him. "Lisa doesn't know I'm here," he said without preamble. "I told her I was working late." The fact that he felt the need to lie to his wife about having dinner with his mother told me everything I needed to know about how far things had deteriorated. "Thank you for coming." He nodded, fidgeting with the sugar packets while the waitress poured his coffee. When we were alone again, he looked up at me with eyes that were so much like his father's, it made my chest ache. "I've been thinking about what you said. About the earrings, about Jessica's party, about all of it." He paused, struggling with words. "I went through my phone last night, looked at our text messages from the past year. And there are gaps, Mom. Conversations that don't make sense. Times when you supposedly called Lisa, but there's no record of any call on my phone. Times when she said she'd talk to you about something, but when I checked the timeline, you were out of town visiting Aunt Ruth." My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice calm. "What else did you find?" "I found the receipt for your earrings in my car, hidden under the floor mat, along with receipts for other gifts I apparently bought but never gave you. A book of poetry I thought you'd like. A gift card to that garden center you love, all hidden where I'd never think to look for them." The systematic nature of it was breathtaking. Lisa hadn't just been intercepting mail and manipulating messages. She'd been stealing gifts, creating evidence, covering her tracks with the precision of someone who'd done this before. "Michael, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Has Lisa ever done anything like this in previous relationships? Have you ever heard her talk about problems with other family members, other in-laws?" He was quiet for so long, I thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Her first marriage ended because of problems with his family. She said they never accepted her, that they were constantly undermining their relationship. She said his mother was manipulative and possessive. "And you believed her?" "Yes. Why wouldn't I?" She seemed so hurt by it all, so confused about why they treated her badly when she was just trying to fit in. A chill ran down my spine. Lisa had a history of this. She'd destroyed one family and moved on to mine, using the same tactics, the same explanations, the same carefully crafted victimhood. "Michael, I think we need to consider the possibility that Lisa's first in-laws weren't the problem. I think Lisa was." His face went white. "Mom, you can't just say something like that. You don't know those people. You don't know what happened." "You're right, I don't. But I know what's been happening here. And if she's done this before..." "Stop." He held up his hand. "Just stop. Even if some of what you're saying is true, even if Lisa has made some mistakes, she's still my wife. She's still the mother of my children. I can't just throw away 12 years of marriage because of some misunderstandings." "I'm not asking you to throw away your marriage. I'm asking you to open your eyes to what's been happening and decide what you want to do about it." "But what if I confront her and I'm wrong? What if there really are innocent explanations for all of this? What if I destroy my marriage over nothing? And what if you don't confront her and you lose your family over everything?" The words hung between us like a challenge. Michael stared into his coffee cup, wrestling with a decision that would change everything no matter which way he chose. "There's something else," he said finally. "Something I haven't told you." My stomach dropped. "What?" "Lisa's been talking about you moving into assisted living. She says she's worried about you living alone at your age, that it's not safe. She's been researching facilities, talking about how we need to start having serious conversations about your future care needs. The room seemed to tilt around me. My future care needs? She says you've been showing signs of confusion, memory problems. She's documented incidents where you supposedly forgot conversations or got confused about dates and times. Documented? She keeps a journal, says she wants to be able to show doctors a pattern if we need to pursue a competency evaluation. I felt like I was going to be sick. Lisa hadn't just been manipulating my relationship with Michael. She'd been building a case to have me declared incompetent, to have me removed from my own life entirely. The hidden mail, the intercepted gifts, the manufactured misunderstandings, they weren't just cruel games. They were evidence in a larger plan to paint me as a confused old woman who couldn't manage her own affairs. Michael, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am not confused. I do not have memory problems. I have never forgotten a conversation with Lisa because I have never had the conversations she claims we've had. She is building a false medical history to use against me. But why would she do that? What would she gain? The answer hit me like lightning. My house, Michael. She wants my house. What? Think about it. If I'm declared incompetent, who makes decisions about my care? Who controls my finances? You do, as my next of kin. And who influences your decisions more than anyone else? Who's been positioning herself as the expert on my declining mental state? Michael's face went from white to gray. No, Mom, you're being paranoid. Lisa wouldn't. She's not after your house. We have our own house. We don't need. Your house has a mortgage. Mine is paid off. Your house is in a neighborhood that's declining in value. Mine is in the historic district where property values keep rising. Your house is small for a growing family. Mine has 4 bedrooms and 2 acres. I watched the pieces click into place in his mind. The calculating looks Lisa gave my house when she visited. The way she'd started commenting on how much space I had, how much work it must be to maintain such a large property. The suggestions about downsizing, about finding a nice apartment or condo that would be easier to manage. She's been setting this up for years, hasn't she? He whispered. I think so. I think the whole campaign to isolate me from the family has been designed to make it easier to move me out of my own life when the time comes. If I'm already seen as confused and difficult, if I've already been distanced from the people who might advocate for me, who's going to question the decision to put me in a facility? Michael buried his face in his hands. Oh God. Oh God. What have I done? You haven't done anything wrong. You trusted someone you loved. You believed someone who seemed to be trying to help. None of that makes you a bad person. But I should have seen it. I should have known something was wrong when you seemed so different from how Lisa described you. I should have trusted my instincts instead of believing her interpretations. Michael, she's very good at this. She's had practice. She knows exactly how to manipulate situations to make herself look helpful and make other people look unreasonable. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. What do I do now? How do I fix this? First, you stop letting Lisa be the go-between for family communications. You talk to me directly, to David directly, to Jennifer directly. You don't accept her interpretations of what other people have said or done. Okay, what else? You find that journal she's keeping about my supposed mental decline, and you read it. Really read it. Look for claims about conversations that never happened, incidents that don't match your own memories, symptoms that seem exaggerated or invented. And then you decide what kind of man you want to be. The kind who protects his family from people who would hurt them, or the kind who stands by and lets it happen because confronting the truth is too uncomfortable. We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us processing the magnitude of what we'd uncovered. The waitress refilled our coffee cups, and I wondered what she thought of the intense conversation happening at our table. Did we look like a mother and son working through normal family drama? Or could she sense that something much darker was being discussed? "There's something else I need to tell you," Michael said finally. "Something that's going to make this even more complicated." My heart sank. "What? Lisa's pregnant." The words hit me like a physical blow. A baby. Another innocent child who would be raised by someone capable of this level of manipulation and cruelty. Another grandchild who might be used as a weapon against me. Another relationship that could be poisoned before it even had a chance to grow. How far along? 3 months. We were planning to announce it at Easter. 3 months, which meant Lisa had been building her case against me, even while knowing she was carrying my grandchild. She'd been planning to isolate me from my family while pregnant with a baby who would never know me as anything other than the confused old woman who had to be managed and eventually removed. "Michael, this doesn't change what she's done. Having a baby doesn't excuse manipulating and isolating family members. If anything, it makes it more important that you address this now before she has another child to use in her games. But how can I confront her about all this while she's pregnant? What if the stress causes problems with the baby? And what if you don't confront her and she uses this baby the same way she's been using Jessica and Tommy? What if she teaches this child that grandma is someone to be wary of, someone who can't be trusted, someone who doesn't matter?" The pain in his eyes was almost unbearable to watch. He was trapped between loyalty to his wife and love for his family, between protecting an unborn child and protecting the relationships that were being systematically destroyed. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "I don't know how to confront her without destroying everything. Maybe everything needs to be destroyed before it can be rebuilt properly." We talked for 2 more hours, planning carefully. Michael would start by simply stopping the pattern of communication through Lisa. He would call me directly, include me in family decisions directly, invite me to family events directly. He would watch Lisa's reactions, document her responses, pay attention to how she tried to reassert control. He would look for that journal and for any other evidence of her campaign against me. He would start asking questions about the incidents she'd reported, checking them against his own memories and the memories of others. Most importantly, he would stop defending her automatically. When she made claims about me, about other family members, about anything, he would verify those claims independently instead of accepting them at face value. It wasn't a perfect plan, but it was a start. As we prepared to leave the diner, Michael reached across the table and took my hand. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I let this happen. I'm sorry I believed her instead of trusting you. I'm sorry I made you feel forgotten and unimportant when you've never been anything but the most important person in my life. You don't need to apologize for loving your wife. You just need to make sure that love doesn't blind you to the truth." "I love you," he said, squeezing my hand. "I love you, and I'm going to fix this." "We're going to fix this," I corrected. "Together." 3 weeks later, Michael called me at 7 in the morning. His voice was shaking. "Mom, I found it. I found the journal, and it's worse than we thought." "How much worse?" "She's been planning this for years, since before we got married. There are entries about studying your routines, learning your habits, figuring out how to position herself as indispensable while making you seem dependent. She has a timeline for getting you moved out of your house. She has research on power of attorney laws. She has a list of your assets." My legs gave out, and I had to sit down on my kitchen floor. "Michael, you need to get out of there. You need to bring the kids and come here now." "I can't. She's asleep upstairs. If she wakes up and finds me gone with the children..." "Then wake her up. Confront her. End this." "What if she denies everything? What if she says the journal is fiction or therapy homework or something I'm misinterpreting?" "Then you tell her you're done being the middleman in family communications. You tell her you're going to start talking to your family directly from now on. You watch how she reacts to losing that control. And if she tries to stop me, then you'll have your answer about what kind of person you married. The confrontation happened that evening. Michael called me afterward, and I could hear Lisa screaming in the background, demanding to know what lies I'd been telling him, what poison I'd been whispering in his ear. Her mask had finally slipped, and the creature underneath was nothing like the sweet, helpful daughter-in-law I'd thought I knew. It took 6 months to untangle everything she'd done. The intercepted mail, the stolen gifts, the manufactured conflicts, the false medical history she'd been building. We discovered she'd been doing the same thing to David and Jennifer, creating misunderstandings and resentments that had slowly been tearing our family apart. Michael filed for divorce. Lisa fought it viciously, trying to use the pregnancy as leverage, claiming he was abandoning his family for his manipulative mother. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the court saw through her performance. She gave birth to a beautiful baby girl that fall. Michael has primary custody, and I get to be the grandmother I always wanted to be. Lisa sees the baby on supervised visits, and she's never allowed to be alone with any of the children. This Christmas was different. We all gathered at my house, the house I still live in, will always live in. The tree was surrounded by carefully chosen, lovingly wrapped gifts. Everyone got something special, something that showed they were thought of, remembered, valued. And when Michael handed me my present this year, I didn't have to wonder if it would mysteriously disappear or if the message behind it was genuine. Because sometimes the greatest gift isn't what's under the wrapping paper. Sometimes it's simply being seen, being heard, being believed when you finally find the courage to tell the truth. Sometimes it's getting your family back,